right, and we are live. How's it going, everybody? My name is Todd Anderson, partner and editor at avnirvana.com, and today is our very first live stream, and we're kicking it off big with our friends at Storm Audio. Up in the top there, we have Gary Blouse. He's a national sales manager for Storm Audio here in the United States, and down below, Matt Trinklein. He is a regional sales manager and a engineering manager, correct, Matt?
Correct.
For Storm, and he's based out of Nevada. So today we are going to be taking a closer look at Storm's brand new ISP Core 16 processor, and that was just launched last month around the time of CEDIA, and it's making a lot of waves. A lot of people are really interested in it, largely because it's now the least expensive piece of Storm gear that you can get, or at least their in terms of processors at $12,000. So that's really exciting. And then we're going to jump in and talk in depth about room correction and some of the tools that Storm gives us to make our system sound even better. So with that, Gary, I'd like to bring you in here so we can start talking about the ISP Core 16.
Thanks a lot, Todd. And you can see we've got an ISP Core 16 right here in front of me. And, we're very excited about this product and that, it's the first one that is going to bring the price point down as far as Storm products go. But, what's really cool about it is that it really benefits from the trickle down technology from the Mark II line. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But, let's start with the basics. I mean, what the things that really define Storm Audio really boil down to three kind of pillars, and those three pillars are pretty easy to understand. The first one is we're an uber reliable platform. We use not only our own engineering prowess to do this, but also we use other experts. For example, we partner with an HDMI manufacturer, Cypress Technologies, which gives us a very reliable HDMI card. That card is the same in both processors, the Mark II and the Core 16. So when everybody asks about, reliability, how's the HDMI? If you think the MK2 is reliable, the Core is going to be exactly the same.
Is that exclusive to Storm?
That is not exclusive to Storm. No, other manufacturers are using them. They just happen to be, we feel, is one of the best players. As you've been able to experience in your system, the latching ability of HDMI and that getting that handshake accurate, all the time or as much as you can is really the most important thing. And the last thing you want as an owner of a processor is to not have a picture or not have sound. Okay, neither of those when you want them is a good thing. So
for sure, yep.
The reliability also is a big part of us because again we use fixed DSP processors, and in our Mark II platform we don't use just 2 or 3, we use actually 5. And by taking and using more chips to do the workload, none of the chips are taxed, more than, let's say, about 30 or 40% of their capacity. That allows us to do a few things. First off, we get way better performance out of that. Secondly, it gives us an upgrade path because, again, the processors have some overhead that they can take as far as, and as technology changes, we can bring new feature sets to the market. So, and again, that's the reliability piece, of course, is based on that fixed DSP chip, but also not overdoing it. Now, Core 16, just to give you a comparison, is going to do it with less chips. It has 3 chips, but still we're not overpowering the unit for what it's doing. So again, you've got a lot of lifespan that you'll be able to upgrade with as far as feature sets, even with a Core 16, but you will have more with a Mark II because again, it has more chips, less capacity being run through those chips. It has really a bigger lifespan of getting those updates.
If I could elaborate for half a second on that too, part of the reason, that we chose to go with that architecture for the DSP on the Core 16 is due to its output configuration. Once again, a Core 16 can never be more than 16 analog outputs. So we don't have the additional need for those 2 other DSP chips.
Okay.
That's right.
Because the Mark II is upgradable in terms of channel count.
Correct.
That's
so
correct.
The Mark II goes up to the 32, which is why you need the extra headroom.
Right.
And by the way, that's a great segue because the other next pillar is upgradability. Okay, and that's another thing that we've done with the Mark II. We take upgradability, really important. I mean, it really, it's a core piece of us because we know that technology is going to change. It's already changing right now. Literally, we're in the middle of an HDMI change. We know that that 8K and an HDMI 2.1 is not going to be the end of it all. Okay, we're literally going to go to 16K, and there'll be an HDMI 2.2, and all those things mean that you're going to need to update. Okay, so you have a couple of options. I mean, you can certainly buy a processor and use it for whatever the lifespan is, and then when technology changes, throw it away and get another one, and keep doing that as many times as you want. Or you can invest in a processor that's upgradable. And when I say that, on the Mark II platform, the upgrade path is the entire thing. Okay, literally, we don't leave any of it in the past. HDMI is upgradable. The audio DAC sections are upgradable, and even the decoding board. This is the thing that actually decodes the Atmos and DTSX and Auro 3D is upgradable, because let's face it, even Atmos changes. Okay, Atmos may not be the flavor of the month, going into 2024. We don't know yet. So the reality is, you don't know where these technology changes are going to happen. But again, in the Mark II platform, you have the ability to really upgrade it anywhere you need to. Also, being in the upgrade business for hardware, you have to I would just say that if you're not releasing hardware, multiple hardware, revisions over time, you're really not in the upgrade business. Okay. And as you look back on the history of Storm Audio, we keep pushing the technology forward. So even if you bought a Mark I processor, you can upgrade the audio section. You can upgrade the video section. So again, you're not left in the technology that you purchased at. You can bring the processor forward. Right. And then the last thing, and we're going to talk about a lot about this today, and that's the calibration tools. And we give you both automated and manual calibration tools. With some customers and some dealers, the automated tools are what they need. With others, they want full manual. But what we're going to show you today is, why can't you use both? I mean, I think you can, right, Matt?
Absolutely, Gary.
Can we talk a little bit about in terms of the Core 16 upgradability wise? We're really talking about HDMI, correct?
That's correct. So basically, a Core 16 its audio section is all fixed. The only thing you can upgrade is the video section. So again, that is one of the limitations with it.
And firmware.
Yep.
Oh, and firmware, of course.
Yes.
And how's what part of the processor are you guys in for 2.1?
Right now, the new board. Yeah, the new board is currently scheduled for a Q1 release of next year. And keep in mind that one of the things that's really core to our part and parcel of who we really are is we want to make sure that's ultra uber reliable. So we have taken our time on making sure that the card comes out once the chipsets are actually finalized. Make sure that we have testing things so we can test the chips. So again, that's kind of where we are in the process. The upgrade will be a rolling change for both the Mark II and the Core 16 when that happens. So, basically as soon as the board's available, all of them will change to that. But we expect to be, again, the Q1 timeframe. Now, let me also say this, there's a lot of push to get, HDMI 2.1 switching in processors these days. How many outboard sources do we have that are HDMI 2.1 these days?
Not many. I mean, basically the advanced gaming consoles.
That's correct. Yeah, and I would characterize those as being really more, they work best with those brands of displays and projectors. Let's just be realistic, because again, when you start with some of the entry level chips, sometimes things aren't as compatible against every iteration of HDMI out there. Right. So I think really the reality is that you're really not going to need HDMI 2.1 switching until later next year is my guess. And that's when we're going to see, things like, an HDMI 2.1 8K version of an Apple TV, with full 8K resolution, or a Fire TV stick, or any of those products, maybe a Kaleidoscape. So again, those are the things that, I think that will really define when you need to have that switching available.
Have you heard any rumblings in the disc market about an 8K version of Blu-ray?
Not much. Again, I look, as fast as we want to push things along, I think sometimes the movie industry in particular wants to not push it as fast. So yeah, so they like to make a little money along the way, and as we change technology on them and mastering and things like that, it sometimes becomes a little more difficult.
Also to
So-
keep in mind is the transition period for all of this technology, right? It's never hey, this is released and now it's the new standard. I mean, think about how many years ago 8K was introduced at trade shows. I mean, you started seeing advertisements for 8K displays at CEDIA back in 2019. And here we are in 2021, and has it been really adapted anywhere mainstream? In some small places, but not really.
I mean, an argument can be made that we're still perfecting 4K.
Right.
I would, I would definitely agree with that because there's the cutting edge and the bleeding edge of everything in technology, and the bleeding edge is there for the blood. I mean, there is some blood involved, so the more stable things get, the better it is for everyone, the consumers, perspective and how their experience is, but also just all the way up the food chain, so to speak. So.
For sure.
Yep.
Yeah. And as you point out, you don't want to be first to market always. As we saw last year, some companies really struggled with their HDMI 2.1 rollouts.
And that can be a problem again. And again, it's, we would prefer to manage the expectations and just, be a little more conservative to the finish line on the product, when it's needed. So
Gary, I see staring at us right in front of you, a beautiful color display on the front of that processor and a physical remote. So what's going on with those?
Well, let's talk about the Core 16 in more in depth. I mean, first off, you can see that it does have a different display from a Mark II, and the display is a full, it has the ability to do not only numerics and alpha text things, but you can also do graphics with it. As you can see, I've currently got it set in what we call VU meter mode. And, if you see all the meters working down below, and there's a couple of the middle that aren't working, those are my wide channels. But basically you're seeing live, all of the output channels and what they're doing. And, this is there for a diagnostic tool for, our dealer base in particular, so that if they're, on a job site and they're having a speaker not work or something, it's really easy just to pull up the VU meter and you can see everything that's going on.
That's right.
Same thing goes on with, HDMI handshake information as far as, am I in the correct color space? Do I have it, do I have HDR10 or Dolby Vision? All of that can be seen from the front panel as well. So again, even troubleshooting HDMI issues can be easy, just because again, we show you all of that. So again, that is, again, new to the Core 16. Also the handheld remote's new. And again, the price point really kind of more warranted the remote. Most Mark II platform projects almost always have some kind of control system. I mean, we see that on I'd say almost 90% of the projects these days. So it's going to be a Crestron, a Control4, a Savant, whatever, and again, we have drivers for all those platforms, pretty much everything. And that's true for those drivers work both on Mark II and Core 16. But, the crowd that's going to buy a 12K may not have that, and we wanted to be able to give you a handheld remote. And the handheld remote gives you all the basic features that you need. You can pick up, you can pull up any of the presets that are needed. So again, presets are what we use to basically lock, a Dirac profile in a theater, and you can also connect other things to it. So again, all of that can be pulled up. You can do, of course, all your volume attenuation and all those things. And then we also have just recently launched, and we've had an iPad app for quite a while, but now we've launched new iOS and Android apps. So even on, a smartphone or, on an Android phone, you're going to be able to now control us. And on those platforms, there's even more control. I mean, if you want to be able to do some, minor adjustments of things like, center or sub levels and things like that, those are available in the app portion, because again, the real estate and then the software didn't allow that. And there's Matt's got it pulled up right now.
Yeah, I've been using that iPhone app. It's fantastic. I have an iPad mini that I have been using, but it's nice just to, not have to power up the iPad.
Yep.
You just roll with the phone, and it's been working great.
Very good. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
So again,
do the apps work with the Core 16 as well?
Yeah, they do.
They do.
They should do. Mm-hmm.
And also to point out, you can have multiple devices on there. So, if you are on a big estate project and there's, 2 or 3 of these guys, you can actually have as many of them as you want loaded in here.
That's correct. So let's talk about. Go ahead.
Will the remote and the color display be available as upgrade features for Mark II?
The remote control is available for Mark II. Mark II does have an infrared eye built into it, so it's already ready for the remote. So yeah, you can just add that on if you decide to. But if you decide you want to add it on to a Mark I, the Mark I didn't have an infrared eye, and you can add an infrared eye to it, which we do sell. So again, even a Mark I customer can even add a remote if they decide that they want that. So let me also tell you one more thing about Core. That's, we talked about it having the core set of features and things like that, but also, it has the more advanced features that we're known for, things like Rune. It's a Rune ready, endpoint. We also have all of the, parametric EQ or PEQs that are out there. And these are things that we use to, and we'll show you how those are used to correct issues in a room manually. Of course, we also support things like active crossovers, and this is true of Core as well. So if you've got a very, some of the more advanced speaker systems, things like Wisdom Audio require 1 amp channel for the high frequency driver and a separate amp channel for the low. And we can do all of that crossover manipulation inside the platform. And again, Core's even capable of that. So what are the different things with Core? Let's talk about that. There is some things that aren't the same between Mark II and the Core 16. And the first one is some of the licenses. Okay, what we've done is, the Core 16 is we feel is going to be really targeted at a particular client. And there's certain things on the licenses they may not need, so we're not going to burden the product with those unless you need them. And those licenses we're going to sell as a single pack. So again, there's not going to be 5 or 7 different licenses you have to buy, but the licenses are, some of the most costly ones. And that's the reason we had to pull them out of the Core 16, including them. So these licenses I'm going to talk about now are included with Mark II, but they are optional and you can add them on to the Core 16. Okay. And the first one is one of the big ones. It's Dirac bass control. And, Todd, I think how profound that is. I think you experienced that. Yeah. Yeah. So bass control really is a game changer. And, I don't think enough people make really put it out there enough, because honestly, it's really the only way that an automated system can really dial in subs, and I will, give props to Trinoff. That's the other one that could do it quite well. And if there's a few other platforms out there as well, DSP platforms, but really, as far as doing it automated and making it easy, I think Dirac's really got it down. I mean, you have to couple that with a little bit of knowledge about how you do the mic survey. And again, that's another thing that's kind of, our secret sauce, in that we know Dirac, and I almost say that Matt and we might have to actually get Dirac tattoos at some point. Yeah. So we've got I think we're starting to get almost at the DNA level with them, but it's a great thing, because now we understand the platform in a way that we can really help our dealer base know how to do a speaker survey and actually get information that really is going to be beneficial for a calibration tool like Dirac to use. So really that's one of the keys. And again, bass control license is not included with the Core 16. That bass control license, if you get the 4 sub version, is about $500 on the Core on the Dirac site. So it's a pricey license.
That's I think that's worth the upgrade though.
I think so too. Right there, I think it's worth the upgrade. Literally,
$500.
They took they're a little bit unique, because they took an approach to bass management that a lot of very, very high-end seasoned expert calibrators have been doing for years, but that automated processes don't, which is actually taking into consideration the full response and phasing of each speaker as the impulse. And the thing that they really try to do, and their pitch for the bass control module, is that they harmonize the subwoofers with each speaker group independently. And really what they mean by that is they're looking for a crossover point where they have a really nice and smooth transient phase alignment between your subwoofer grouping and your speakers. And that's really, really important. And we'll take a look at that shortly.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Without it, Dirac Live natively goes down to coverage down to 20 hertz, correct?
That's correct.
So you could still do a full, room calibration, and it's one of the things some people prefer to do that because they want to take advantage of StormAudio's expert bass management and the bass routing. With that, you have the ability to have 6 separate bass zones in a room, and you don't want to use the bass control module suite because it can't account for that. It can only account for a singular bass zone. So, we've seen a lot of, client situations where, they have a really customized room, lots of subwoofers, and they're really able to dial in the immersive factor. Because psychoacoustically, the human brain is not supposed to be able to dictate where sound below 80 hertz originates from. But in the real world, that's just not the case, because you have all these room elements and other types of fundamentals and harmonics that play in that'll cue on your brain and say, oh, the subwoofer is over there. And so now you're pulled out of the immersion of the experience. And, at the end of the day, why do we watch movies? Why do we watch TV? Why do we listen to music? Why do we read book? It's an escape from reality into another world, right? It's a daydream. So anything that we do that pulls you out of that, for example, the subwoofer, being localized, is kind of a failure on our part. So that's really, trying to follow that bleeding edge and take things to the next level. So I'm really excited to see, where all of that goes in the next, 3 to 5 years. But
and to be clear, that technology essentially, it's almost as if it's multi-channel, correct? It moves the bass around the room based on where the action is. Essentially, if there's an explosion behind you, the subs behind you are getting the majority of the workload.
Exactly. So your LFE, and you can configure this however you want. So, you can, blend and mix levels and attenuate it. But the LFE bank will natively, when you go into the expert with the bass routing, it's going to feed to every one of your subwoofers, whereas your bass management is going to be directed. And once again, you can control that as much as you like.
Okay. Yep.
So let's describe that again, just to make sure everybody understands that. Whenever we set a speaker to small, we're doing a bass redirect. That's what the bass management does. And that bass redirect on most processors goes to all your subs simultaneously, meaning that if you're playing if there's an explosion in the front of the room on the left speaker, it's coming out of the back sub. Okay. And that's what Matt's talking about, pulling you out of the immersive experience. So we're talking about redirected bass in particular that is available to be routed in our expert bass management. And that is, by the way, and thanks for the transition there, Matt, that's another license that, again, is included in the license pack. So again, if you want either Dirac's bass control or our expert bass management, those are both included in the license pack, as well as a couple other things. And again, I'll mention those. StormXT, we'll definitely dive more into this in a future, webcast. But the, StormXT is our ambience expander. And the best way to describe this is, we see a lot of deployments with our processor where a client wants both an Atmos speaker configuration and an Oro speaker configuration as well. And they want to be able to use both. But, when you watch Atmos content through your Oro, your Oro speakers don't work. And when you watch Oro content, your Atmos speakers don't work. But clients don't want that. They want everything to work. That's what StormXT does. It brings the ability to not just put in something into the speaker, but actually extract ambient information from the objects that are close by and bring them to that location. So again, it is all in real time. So this is a pretty, we're pretty proud of this. We'll get more in depth in that. And then the other feature that will come on, that'll be part of the license pack with the Core 16 is dual zone HDMI as well. So let's say you want to be able to run, not only your theater, but maybe a master bedroom at the same time. Now you can feed both your video and your audio into both zones and control it that way. So, and again, that's another, all of these licenses that I've talked about are included with Mark II, but they're optional at an additional expense with the Core 16.
Okay.
So I think at this point, we've talked about the Core 16 a little bit on that end. I think what we'll do is, as you guys, I'll let you guys get into the presentation part of this, and we'll let Matt go ahead and talk about the calibration tools. And then what I'll do is I'll pause my camera and I'll spin the unit around and and we'll have the backside, live, so you can see the rear panel. Because I think honestly, the back is as sexy as the front. So I'm just saying.
I love the silver, the shiny surface on the back of all your processors. It really sets them apart.
Yeah, we love it as well. And to be really honest, we've had a lot of our dealer base say, "Hey, it's easier to read." Well, yeah. Yeah. So if you're in the back of a rack, it's all about contrast.
Everything's dark already back there. So
it's really true.
That's true. Yeah. It's an absence of light. So Matt, I'm going to turn it over to you. Why don't you tell us about the tools and what we can do with them?
By all means. Thank you, Gary. And thank you, Todd, for having us on here. We really
For
appreciate
sure.
it.
I really appreciate you guys joining me.
Yeah. So, whenever we get a chance to talk about this stuff, this is what Gary and I geek out on. So for us, it's just another afternoon. But anyways, so let's talk about, room calibrations and subwoofer integration with a speaker. And, the whole point of this conversation is to make sure that you guys as the dealers and integrators are really able to provide your end customers with the full value of their system. Because, at the end of the day, what you're hearing is 50% of what the actual audio equipment is producing, and the other 50% of it is how the room is manipulating that before it gets to your ear. So this is something that you have to be very aware of. And every room really does require a calibration. And, there's some situations and setups where you might have multiple calibrations within a room. Say, for example, you have a large motorized perforated screen, and that's doing some manipulation to your frequency response of your speakers before it hits you. So I've seen lots of cases where people have a separate calibration for when the screen is up and they're listening to music, so that they don't have anything restricting the speakers, and they're getting them in a more natural state. But that would be a situation where you would want a secondary calibration. But going back to this, every room needs one, at least one. And the ISPs have a full suite of calibration tools for everybody, no matter, how advanced and how long you've played with this, whether you've been in the industry for, 30, 40 years, or if you're taking your first stab at it. And I think, Todd, you can probably speak firsthand to that from the time that you and I spent together with Dirac, and then, the time that you've spent on your own. So
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So absolutely. So, going back to, some of the, changes and similarities that Gary was talking about, both the MK2 and the Core 16 ISPs are fully equipped with calibration tools, active crossover management to make sure that we can handle all those really difficult systems out there like Wisdom Audio. And that's what we're going to be looking at actually today is an older Wisdom Audio Adrenaline speaker, an M70. And then, of course, the powerful DSP that we have on board with those 5 or 3 DSP chips, depending on which platform you go with. No matter which one you are, the MK2 or the Core 16, both of them have the same bank of 20 PEQs per channel, which is a lot. I think that might be one of the higher ends for what's available as far as calibration tools in the market and processors. And then, of course, standard and expert base management. And, like Gary mentioned, for the Core 16, the base routing is an add-on. So that's something to keep in mind. And then the other thing that's really nice about this is we have an internal signal generator with input mapping. So that allows you to use any measurement platform you want. So whether you use REW, whether you use Smart 8 by Rational Acoustics, really whatever your flavor is, you can use that input stimulus, and that way you're having a really verified measurement, and you can go in and do before and after. And that's another thing that we don't really see is a lot of people go in and they say, okay, well, let's do a Dirac calibration, and then that's it, we're done. So, there's no secondary validation of that, right? Dirac doesn't come in and say, okay, now that you're done, let's take another measurement sweep at the sweet spot and see what the variation is. It's a prediction. So we're going to look at that. So what I'd like to do is I have a bunch of measurements that I've taken in REW, and this is from my home theater downstairs. And this was a very, very basic, simple, quick and dirty run through. So what I did was I started off with my M70, just one of them, my right speaker. And the M70 is an old Adrenaline series Wisdom Audio speaker, and it is actually a 72-inch planar magnetic ribbon that was built by BG Corp before they decided to shift businesses. And it's paired with 2 12-inch woofers. And so I'm crossing those over in about the 160, 170 range, just because the 72-inch planar magnetic has a really, deep extension point for a planar magnetic driver, which is one of the reasons that I love that speaker. So what I did is to start, I stripped out all of my voicing that I did when I designed it, all of the EQs that I've done for the room. And so what we're going to take a look at is just the raw speaker in the room at the sweet spot where I'm listening in my couches.
All right.
And that looks like this. So, you can see this is nowhere near perfect. And, just to notate here, we are on a 5 dB scale for big groupings, but you can see the individual dB lines between each one. So, yeah, rough. That's not the prettiest thing in the world.
That's some big dips there.
So Matt, point out for everyone exactly where the problems are, if you would. What are you seeing in this?
So we've got a huge issue here at 4K. This is going to be a tremendous null. We're down here almost to 50 dB when our reference line is kind of around the 65 mark. So that's a 25 dB hole. That's horrendous. We've got a really sharp peak here around 6K. That's something that you kind of find in planar magnetic speakers because of the aluminum that's in them. They tend to have a ring that happens in the higher frequency range that you need to treat and take out. And then, you just kind of have this back and forth because it's one planar magnetic ribbon covering from right here all the way up. And, for one driver to do that is tremendously difficult. That's why you see a lot of, really high-end speaker configurations where they have, 3, 4, 5-way speaker. And it's very, very common these days in really, really high-end systems. But I just want to show what we can achieve, just in a very basic, simple thing. So the next slide that I'm going to show is that speaker with the subwoofers. So all I've done is I've set my speaker back to small so the bass management's in place. This is standard bass management. I've done no fine tuning whatsoever. This is just how it came out of the box when I clicked it from Storm. So, you can see with the subwoofers, you could almost make the argument that, hey, it would be better to listen to this system without the subwoofers. But I know that my cabinet does not have the range because I took it all apart and worked on it and revoiced everything. So I know that my cabinet's not going to play pretty down here, and I want my subwoofers involved. So, let's take that away for a second and just look at the integrated by itself. So the next thing that I did is I said, okay, and I took, this exact graph, I went back in and did some playing and added some EQs on top of the original voicing that I had. And I've got a screenshot of that here. So you can actually see all of the manipulations that I'm doing. So this is all of the EQs that I have in here. And this is Storm's EQ suite, by the way. So down here, you've got a low pass, shelving, a peaking filter, which we're using just referred to as a bell in this case, the shelf in the other direction, and a high pass filter. So you can see I've got some shelving in place, and most of what we're seeing is PEQs, but I have 10 of them. And you can see that down here. This is filter 10. And, to point out still, I'm only using half of the DSP power that I have available. I have another 10 EQ cells should I need them. And there's a reason, correct, just for one channel. And this is actually a bi-amplified speaker. So what you're looking right now is just the high frequency module. I have a replication of this on my low frequency module. So I actually have 2 channels feeding this one speaker for a total of 40 PEQs that I could possibly use. So, tremendous horsepower. But I only used half of them for a reason. And to show you that is because one of the main questions that we always get is, well, can you mix EQs with Dirac? Say I go through Dirac and I don't, love what Dirac has done. Can I go in and make small adjustments without doing it in Dirac? And the answer is yes. So, let's take a look. This is how that speaker looks after it's been EQ'd. So you can see we haven't completely fixed, but we've done a lot for this null that was right up here at about 4.2 kilohertz. We've raised up our high end. We've taken out this little peak, even though we haven't taken out dramatically. So what my goal here was small steps. I wanted to get, say, 40, 50% of where my target curve is going to lie over this. And then as you can see, I fixed a little bit of the, upper mid-range here and all the way through. And then you can see we're pretty consistent down through the low end because I did no manipulation there. Everything is above 100 hertz. So then I went into Dirac and I did, like I said, quick, down and dirty. This was a 1 measurement position calibration. And from here, we went to this. That is the actual output for Dirac with the subwoofers integrated using only 1 position. And in the standard room, we're going to do probably 9. I know for Todd's theater, that's what we did. He's got a 5-seat couch. We did a 9 position. I've got a 3-seat couch, and this is just only the first sweet spot. So no other additional information, just a very basic approach. So that looks great. You can see we still got some room things going on here that we're not going to be able to fix unless we fix the room. But this is a living room in my house that opens up to my kitchen and dining room and everything else. It's not a dedicated theater, and it's never going to be perfect. And there's some room things that I'm just not going to get away from, and that's okay because that's not what this application is meant to be. But I really want to show what Dirac can do. So, let's take a look specifically at the subwoofers, if you don't mind.
And real quick,
sorry.
Yeah, real quick, Matt. I just want to mention this. As good as Dirac is, it does best when it does the least. And what I mean by
Correct.
that is if you have your room properly treated, then it doesn't have to work as hard. All right. Same thing goes with the PEQs that Matt's doing. By having the speakers have a little of those problems taken care of before the calibration with Dirac. Again, Dirac has to do less, and it performs better. So again, that's the reasoning for doing it this way. But also, let me mention this: the places that Matt avoided, if he were to apply PEQ to that, it probably wouldn't have filled in anything, and it probably would have done more damage than good. So in talking about these PEQs, the thing I want to mention is this: without some background knowledge of acoustics, it's hard to know what's going to make a difference and what's not. Now, you certainly can do hit and miss and try things, but again, people like Matt and I are able to see acoustic issues just by looking at a room, just seeing where the speakers are positioned in a room, and we'll know how that translates into what we see on the frequency graphs. So just wanted to mention that.
Yep, exactly. And to further that point, so it's a lot easier for Dirac to get from the orange to the purple than it is from Dirac to get to the green to the purple. So that's why I call this a pre-EQ, because it's almost like I'm preconditioning the system before I'm going to go into the automated calibration. So, as Gary said, this is a piece of computer software that is trying to interpret how the human ear hears and, make an analysis and corrections based on what we say that we want to hear, and by no means is any of this perfect. There is no 100%, this is the right way to do it. There's no one approach. Just like with voicing a speaker and design, room calibration tends to be a very fine line that you walk between art and science, and they go hand in hand. And at the end of the day, the thing that I would like to impress mostly is listen to your ear, because 90% of the time your ear doesn't lie. So if there's something that you hear and you say, hey, there might be something going on here, chances are there is. One of my mentors back when I was doing more audio engineering stuff liked to tell me the golden rule of audio is everything does something, but not everything does something important. So always be aware. But just a real quick to show you, this is what this is what my actual Dirac looked like. So this is just the one measurement through. This is our StormAudio LCR cinema target curve. We do have a target curve for LCR, surrounds, and subwoofers. So what I do is I go in and I load each one to each group, and then I turn on the full bass optimization. And you can see right here that I'm setting my crossover at 66 Hertz. It's a little bit low, but because I have those two 12-inch woofers, I like to have them play. So, a crossover is never a brick wall, and you can see that by these lines here. So really what I'm getting is the best of both worlds. My subwoofers and the playback from those two 12 inches that are in that was the Audio M70. So then I have a capture here of what Dirac has predicted. So this is what Dirac predicts that my spectrum is going to be after it's done with the calibration and after the filter export's been done to the ISP. So you can see even that, null that I had at 100 Hertz, it's a room problem. Dirac is saying, yeah, that's still going to be there. I'm not going to fix that. I don't have the capabilities to do that. So, nothing is perfect, but, everything is a step further. So it's always a conversation of, hey, we can probably get the system to, 80% in the first hour and a half, and then the seasoned calibrator could go in and spend the rest of that first day and get the system to 90. So in the second day, get the system to 95%, and then it's how much more can I go? You could spend another week working on fine tuning and calibration and only get from 95 to 96%, and that happens a lot of the time. So it's also very important to save as you go.
But I know if you're correcting above 300, 500 Hertz. Some folks are going to say not to do that. Is there a reason? I mean, do you prefer to go ahead and correct the full frequency spectrum?
Absolutely. I mean, look at the differences we have. We fixed this hole that we had at 1K. We fixed this little patch that we had at 4K that my EQ didn't bring all the way up. We fixed this. there are a couple of things in here that if I was to go in and do another layer of post EQ, which I didn't do, but that's why I left those 10 PEQs, because like I said, I did all of this in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So, to be able to go from our starting point, which was that green line, to that in 30 minutes is pretty tremendous. And to be able to do that for an entire theater, it's really spectacular.
Yeah.
But, once again, I want to touch on subwoofers. So this is what my subwoofers look like before Dirac. No EQ, nothing, just how they measure with both of them in the room. And then this is what they look like after Dirac. So you can see that there's a really, really steep amount of correction that Dirac's doing. Once again, with room modes, it's not going to fix absolutely everything, but it's giving us a much more level and even response, and it's following along with our target curve. So if we blow that up, we can really see, the depth of what it's doing. So, here down this peak at 75 Hertz, which is where a lot of people cross over systems, where my subwoofers before were down here at 63 dB. Now I'm up at 78 or 77, excuse me. So, that is a tremendous difference.
I mean, Todd, you've heard bass control and how profound it is, in your system. And I think I remember when we first did the deployment, you said, I've never been able to move around my couch and get smooth bass.
100% true.
Yeah. And how is that now?
Oh, it's amazing. The bass is even across the entire seating area, but not only that, it's even as you move forward in the room. There's no boomingness. It's just very tight and under controlled, which I had never heard before with systems I'd run previously to that. So
I would tell you that probably most people have not heard a properly aligned subwoofer system. Honestly, it's a very big. It changes the dynamic of your system. I mean, and I mean that both figuratively and directly as well.
Well, it's super important for the entire experience when you're watching a movie to have the low end tamed and properly controlled.
It's incredible.
It changes everything. Yeah, it really does.
And so what I would. Go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say, Gary and I, are very, very lucky to be with Storm. It's one of the things that we love about being in this team is, we are both audio nerds. We play with this stuff constantly. I mean, if I could show you, the bank of calibrations that I have just for one of the rooms in my house that has an audio system, it's kind of silly, but it's a lot of fun.
It's not silly.
It's really nice to also be able to say, hey, I've got a better bass response in my theater in my house that's not a dedicated theater by any means than in some theaters that I've heard that are dedicated theaters that cost 3 times the value of my home. And that's all thanks to the ISP and to Dirac, because I've been playing with this stuff for a while, and well, to be fair, I haven't lived in this house that long, but
right, and you're having more than 3 times the experience, right?
So,
I mean, it's true. Yeah,
it's fantastic. So, just as a summary, I want to look at where we started at compared to our final point. So, this green curve is the raw integrated. So that's just a speaker, no EQ with the subwoofers compared to what Dirac has done. And like I, mentioned before, I could spend, infinite more time playing with EQs post this and dialing the system in even further. And, I just want to point out too, I'm not trying to hide anything or be clever. I'm only using a 1/24th smoothing on everything else and no smoothing at all actually on the subwoofer target curves. Okay. So it's something a lot of people like to do with measurements, and it doesn't make sense. That speaker's never going to be flat.
Right.
So Todd, where do you want to go? I mean, as far as the basics of that we wanted to convey, that's pretty much it. Where do you want to, you said you had some additional things you kind of wanted to talk about.
Well, it's, we had discussed a little bit price and what you're getting in terms of bumping up to a $12,000 processor and beyond compared to what's available in, similar dedicated processors that cost significantly less. I mean, that's probably the number one comment that I see anytime I write about Storm or a Trinklein, when you guys have new product releases. The first comment is, well, geez, I could get something extremely similar for a fourth or eighth of the cost. So, I was curious to hear what your response to that would be.
What I would say is this, and let's, we'll go ahead. I don't usually call out, other brands, but you brought up a brand. So let's go ahead and let's address it, because I know that the AV Nirvana crowd, it talks about this one a lot, and that's the mono price piece.
Yep.
And, at $4,000, you're looking at a processor that has, quite a bit built in. But let's talk about, what I perceive as the differences. And here, the biggest one, and again, some of this will be back to our core, beliefs as far as Storm. You have no upgrade path. Okay. So you're pretty much on an island. I mean, you're not going to be, and I don't think there will be upgrades for this. I mean, I could be completely wrong. And if I am wrong, please, post that in the comments. But bottom line is there is no upgrade path. So, you're really faced with two things. I mean, how many $12,000 processors will you buy with us? You buy one. And how many $4,000 processors will you buy with mono price to get to HDMI 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, whenever that happens, if they offer updates? You're going to pay more money over time. You really are. And quite honestly, the other thing that is really critical here is it's not only the calibration tools, but it's how we apply them. And, let me just do a little, promotion here. And, we have this thing that we call a Pro Remote Assisted Calibration, or a PRAC. And honestly, literally, I think if most people were to do one of these, they would help them. But it's our deep understanding of Dirac that really makes the difference. Okay. And that is something that, you're not going to get, from, quite honestly, you're not going to get from our YouTube videos. You can go look at them. They're good, but we don't give you all the secret sauce, because we reserve that for our dealer base. In addition to that, the other thing is that, although you get, a lot of bang for the buck, it is, I'm not sure it's all that much bang for the buck. You know what I mean? And what I would say is this: if you were to audition the two pieces side by side, I don't think anybody would make that choice, would be buying a $4,000 processor if they were actually just to audition it. And and I'll tell you, it's not always the audio performance that'll be the difference. It's the reliability. It's all the other pieces. It's the control. It's how does it work? Is the experience good? I can tell you about the experience with the Storm processor. It's a pretty amazing experience. It works. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to reboot it. And, that's what you want. At the end of the day, the last thing you want to do is, deal with your processor not doing what it's supposed to do. As Matt said it, I think the best, I want to be drawn into this immersiveness because I have a stressful job. I have a stressful life, and we live in a stressful world. And those are the reasons right there that I don't want my processor to be between me and the movie. Okay. Right. Quite honestly.
Yeah. When you want that escape, you want to jump into the escape.
And I can't stress enough that getting the room out of the equation, literally, it's a game changer. And again, I'll tell you, just to describe Matt's room, Matt has a smaller space, and I would say it's pretty representative of what I think a lot of your viewers will face. And these smaller spaces have more profound acoustic issues than bigger spaces. Let me characterize that. If you can afford a 60-foot by 60-foot by 60-foot room, you're not going to have bass issues, okay? Because the wavelengths of the bass, the length of the room is larger than the wavelength of the bass that you're going to be reproducing in the room. So again, this is where these room correction tools really are profound, especially in the smaller rooms. Again, as the room gets smaller, you have more and more issues, especially on the bottom end. So this is Matt showing you right now the graphics we produce, when you do a PRAC. So basically we take all the guesswork. Yeah. We take all the guesswork out of the equation. We know exactly where the microphone locations should be and their exact heights to get a good broad scope of the room. That way you can actually treat it correctly. So again, this is really how we kind of if secret sauce, this is core to who we are. So,
sure.
And these are actually all real projects.
And it's pretty incredible what he was able to do remotely in terms of impacting the sound of my home theater room. So
You know,
It
it's really it's two things. He has a good set of tools, okay, and it's like anything. You know, if I go try to work on my car, and I literally have one of those tool packs that has 122 tools, I can't pull the engine out. I'm sorry, it doesn't have the tools to do that. If I have a full snap-on cabinet of tools, now I can pull an engine out, and that's the difference. We give you so many tools that you really can profoundly affect the sound. So. And this PRAC is part of it. Again, knowing, you know, it's really the acoustic knowledge that we bring to the table that is really the key behind the PRAC. The PRAC would be nothing if you're not able to look at the room visually and say, I'm going to have this problem, I have this problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep the microphone survey like this to make sure that the problems aren't the things that dictate my sound for my room, if that makes any sense. So.
You know, as I mentioned, there's no one way to do it. So, you know, all of these are different appropriations, and, you know, we may go into this and come in and say, okay, you know, position 10 is a problem. We have to adjust this position because we're not getting a microphone reading here that's coherent with the rest of the room, and it's going to start to skew our results. You know, those are things that we look at step by step as we go through each measurement throughout the process.
Roughly how long does it take to do a remote
you can do one. I've been on ones where, you know, the dealer's fully prepared. We go in, everything's ready to go, and, you know, we're done and out the door in 60 to 75 minutes, and they're very, very satisfied with the system. And then, you know, there's times where we go in, we may have to fix a few things, and we can't actually get started with the calibration for 30, 45 minutes, but that's okay, because we need to repair those things before we start, because it's going to give us a much, much better result at the end. And that's all right. So with the PRAC, you get our time for 4 hours. That is the time limit on it.
Yeah, and just let me also stress this. It's really the, you know, again, and I'm going to give Matt kudos here. Matt is really great at looking at, you know, pictures of a room and knowing where the problems are going to be, you know. And again, this is critical. I mean, it allows you to have, you know the path to get to the solution, you know, pretty much every time. And that's one thing that I'd say is, you know, that's one thing about calibrations. Calibrations require you to have, you know, I'd say the best calibrators, when they walk into a perfect room, they're going to be able to hit it out of the park. Everyone can hit it out of the park. It's when they walk into a really bad room that's got all kinds of problems that they draw from all their knowledge of all the other projects they've done to fix. And that's the difference. And again, that's what we bring to the table remotely with the PRAC, is the ability to really visually look at the room, figure out the acoustic issues that you're going to face, and then how do you overcome them. And again, you'd have to know the tool to do that. One thing I think Matt mentioned mentioned earlier was, you know, we have our own target curves, but those target curves are not one size fits all. In fact, all target curves are not one size fits all. Every project has to have some customization of the target curve. And with Dirac, go ahead.
I probably adjust 70% of the rooms that I perform a PRAC on, because, you know, there's something that we need to account for. We need to take into fact the, you know, what the speaker is capable of, because, you know, at the end of the day, Dirac is a fantastic tool, but, you know, it can't push the boundaries of physics. No technology can. And a lot of time in this industry, I think there's a degree of smoke and mirrors of that. And they say, oh, you know, you can achieve this. And it's realistically partially, but it's something to keep in mind, because, you know, at the end of the day, this is a sector of technology that is still advancing and being chased every day.
That's
Go on. Sorry, Gary.
Yeah.
Really, I can't, again, I think we've pretty much said everything about the calibration piece. So we've hammered that one home pretty hard.
For sure. Can you briefly just talk about the hybrid volume control? Because that's something that I think a lot of people miss out.
So, you know,
considering when it comes to Storm Audio products.
So, you know, basically the volume attenuation methods that are out there these days, you know, you have either strictly digital, and there's pros and cons to everything, of course. You know, having digital attenuation, it gives you lots of granular control. That's what our Mark I platform had. So, you know, as you're turning down, you're getting those half dB increments, you know, that are very consistent through the scale. All right. And again, digital does that very well. Analog, on the other hand, you know, is not quite as good at that. All right. So again, you know, but with digital, if you're going to do attenuation, that means that you really you're running your output stages at full gain all the time. All right. And then pulling down from there. And what ends up happening with that is you end up with, although you get all the benefits of the digital side, you also end up, exhibiting your background noise level pretty much as loud as it gets. Now, with most speaker systems that have crossovers, no one would ever hear this. I mean, we're talking background levels that you'd have to, even if you had, let's say a passive speaker, you put your ear up to it and you wouldn't be able to hear it. But we deal with a lot of speaker systems that are a little beyond the norm, a little more exotic. And, and again, we've been talking about Wisdom Audio a little bit, but that's, one of the brands. And again, they're a different animal when it comes to this stuff. So, Matt, as far as the volume attenuation that's hybrid, now what we do there is basically we're using an analog, methodology for the attenuation now, but we're using digital for the steps in between. So basically, as you're adjusting things, the volume attenuation is is manipulating it in both digital and analog forms instantaneously as you're making adjustments.
And they're synchronized too. So, to just, touch real quick, we hear differently at different volume levels. So the human ear actually has a different frequency response of what you take in at very loud levels compared to quiet levels. You hear different things, are more pronounced, this, there, and there. So by mating and synchronizing the analog and the digital volume scaling and control together, what it allows you to do is really keep more of the fidelity of your dynamic range throughout the system, whether you're listening quietly or loudly. The other thing that's a big improvement with that is, as Gary mentioned, the noise floor. Doing this and going to this approach in this new architecture and design allowed us to drop our noise floor from 20 microvolts down to 4, which is a huge comparison.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when we do these very exotic Wisdom systems, again, you could hear the background noise because they are so efficient. I mean, we're talking efficiencies that are above 100 dB, 1 watt, 1 meter. And, in addition to that, and you're running these things can take tons of power. So you're running them with, 28 dB and 32 dB gain amplifiers. That's why you can hear that's why these noise levels that we're talking about become very critical, because again, as the systems go up, they become more revealing on everything, and that's the content, that's there, but also what the electronics are bringing into the equation. So, one of the things that we strive for, at least on the digital side of our platform, is to be a black canvas, nothing. There's no personality. That's what we want. We don't want any of our, when people ask what are our digital amps like, do they have, they don't add any of their personality. That they just provide you, they just transport the music from a very low level signal to a high level signal, and that's it, and nothing in between. So that's what we're shooting for here. And again, that's the beauty of this design. And again, by the way, in both platforms, again, ISP Core 16 has the same abilities. So
yeah, keep that noise floor whisper quiet as you get to louder volumes is basically the end game, and it really works, and it's noticeable.
Yeah. So again, I think we've talked about how factoring that room out's huge. I mean, again, and that's really what our platforms do. Our platforms are all about doing that. Remove the room from the equation, and you get closer to the artist. If you're listening to music, if you're watching a movie, you're getting closer to the director and the mixing guy and what he intended you to get as far as that experience. And again, that's what we all are shooting for. If we're enthusiasts, we're literally wanting to get as close as we can, pull all those layers out in between, and put that person or that movie right in my living room and literally make it a live thing. So that's what we do.
Awesome. Well, guys, we are coming right up on an hour here, so I think we'll probably cut it off. Just for our viewers, I reviewed the MK2. Was I guess the end of last year, beginning of this year, and I'll put a link to that down in the description. So please come over and read my thoughts on that unit. It was a ton of fun to get my hands on that thing, and ultimately, I ended up purchasing one. Just a great piece of home theater gear. So Matt and Gary, I really appreciate you joining me today and talking shop about your new gear and room correction. It's been a fun time.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Yeah. And hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Sounds
Sounds
good.
good. Looking
Awesome.
forward to it.
All right. Well, have a great day.
All right, everyone. Have a good weekend.